Paris, Alzheimer's is the sixth leading cause of death in the United States. On average, a person with Alzheimer's lives 4 to 8 years after diagnosis, but can live as long as 20 years depending on other factors. Now, that's all according to the Alzheimer's Association. Although there is still no cure, researchers at Northwestern University are looking into how the brain might be able to protect against Alzheimer's. The university just announced a major financial boost to promote further cognitive and brain health research, a $20 million grant from the National Institute on Aging. Joining us is the scientist leading this group of researchers, neuroscientist Emily Rogalski, Associate Director of the Mesolam Center for Cognitive Neurology and Alzheimer's Disease. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Emily, your research has coined the term SuperAger. First, tell us what that is.
Sure. Thanks for having me here today. I'm excited to tell you about our SuperAgers. So it's a kind of funny, quirky term, but it stands for individuals who are over age 80, but have memory performance at least as good as individuals in our 50s and 60s. So to kind of back up, when we think about memory and how memory works as we age, we know that our memory tends to peak in our 20s or 30s, maybe 40s. And then there's some decline that happens after that as we age. That's part of what's thought to be the normal process of aging. So an individual who is in their 80s has different normal or average memory performance compared to someone in their 50 and 60. So we're looking for people who are over age 80 who have that outstanding memory performance. You can think of them as that neighbor or that friend that you know, who you say, oh, you'd never know that they were 80, they act like they're 50 or they act like they're 30. These are the types of individuals that we were seeking to find.
And I want to come back to some of the behaviors of those SuperAgers in a second as well. But as we mentioned, you just received this $20 million grant from the National Institute on Aging. How is that grant going to further your research?
Well, we've been really excited to do this research on SuperAgers for more than a decade now. And the idea comes from a lot of vantage points. One is that we're an Alzheimer's disease research center. And one of the ways that we can understand Alzheimer's disease is by inviting participants and to study the neurobiology of Alzheimer's disease itself and try to understand what can we do to change that trajectory? Another path that we can take is identifying people who are SuperAgers who seem to avoided that change in memory or thinking ability. So these are potentially protective factors. We've been doing this research, as I mentioned, for more than a decade now, and that's all mostly been locally here in the Chicagoland area. This grant gives us the opportunity to extend the scope of science that we're doing and also really extend across the United States and Canada so that we can find SuperAgers outside of the Chicagoland area.
So you'll be increasing to a new consortium, about what, 500 participants that you're adding up to?
Yes, exactly. So we'll be enrolling 500 participants across 5 different sites, including Wisconsin and Georgia and Canada and Michigan. So we're excited to expand both physically and in the science that we're able to cover.
Absolutely. So your research has shown that a few habits of SuperAgers, they continue to lead an active lifestyle and they challenge themselves mentally as well. They are social butterflies and they enjoy the occasional beverage, a glass of wine or a nightcap. What physical characteristics of their brains have you noted, and how does that translate to their cognitive performance?
Sure. So you've mentioned some of kind of our initial observations in this group, but when we look at the biology of SuperAgers, one way that we can measure the health of the brain is through MRI scans. And there we can look at the thickness or the outer layer of the brain that gives us a proxy measure of the health of the brain. We see that in normal or average aging, the brain tends to shrink with time. And that shrinkage is associated with changes in our thinking ability. What we look at in the SuperAgers is that does their brain look more like their 80-year-old peers who they share the same chronologic age with, or more like the 50-year-old peers who they share memory performance with? And what we found is that the SuperAgers brains look more like those 50-year-old brains than they do like the 80-year-old brains. And in fact, there was a region in the anterior cingulate that was thicker in the superagers than it was even in the 50-year-olds. We've then extended those findings to look under the microscope from superagers who, after they passed away, have donated their brain at the time of death. And there we can look for other cellular and molecular factors and found that there's unique features there as well.
So your research discusses successful cognitive aging. For curious viewers and inquiring minds, how do you recommend that people take care of their cognitive health as they age?
So our research is in and among a great span of research that's looking at these questions of how do we optimize cognitive aging. And so we're learning bit by bit from the superagers what they can tell us, but some of those things that you mentioned earlier about staying active, having a good outlook on life, those things are important. And we've shown that scientifically with other studies. In our research, we're really digging into those protective factors. And through this consortium, we'll be better able to answer those questions because we'll have greater depth and breadth of the science that can be done.
Okay, something to keep an eye on for sure. Emily Rogowski, thank you so much for joining us and best of luck.
Thank you very much.